Hi everybody, welcome to our soiree in gender and leadership. This is the 7th edition of the Nordhaus text. I've had contact with this text since I was in my master's program in 2005. This text has evolved. I've seen it forever. Until this chapter, this was the Women in Leadership chapter. This chapter is going to focus on women, but we're going to be talking about gender and leadership as well. I think we're getting to a point where we're looking at gender and leadership and also on LGBT issues in leadership too. So this has changed. This is a different approach than what we're used to, but I also think it's good to see that this is something that this is something that has changed that's changed throughout our educational system. Once again, bear with me. I'm going to try to give this a darker background style. Yeah, the headings will be difficult to see, but you'll be able to see the text a little bit better. So I can't talk about this year without talking about the Caitlyn challenge, as I call it. Caitlyn or Bruce Jenner is a leader in some form, whether you want to admit that or not, because it's a prolific transgender personality and it's paving the way for others. I'm a big South Park fan. I like the way that it was presented in the Stunning and Brave episode. I love the commentary of Trey Parker and Matt Stone, and I think it's good, and I think it offers a good perspective on things. My relation to this, if I'm taking this to schools, is this the person we want to lead this movement? Do I have a place to say that? I'm not transgender, so maybe it needs to be a voice from the community. I'm also a music fan, and if you're familiar with the band Against Me, they were very big about 8-9 years ago. They had one big song. I Was a Teenage Anarchist, crossed over to mainstream music, but their lead singer ended up being transgender and identifies now as Laura Jane Grace. His name was Tom Gable, and he transitioned to female and now goes by Laura. That was kind of the iconic figure in the movement, and now it's Caitlyn Jenner. So I have a blunt argument against this, and this is my opinion. I'm not a fan of the Kardashians as a whole. I'm not a fan of the family. I'm not a fan of the way that the show was perceived. I'm not a fan of the way that the marketing was done, and I'm not a fan of the effect that it's had on teenage society, in particular teenage girls. I don't think it's been good. I ask, if Bruce Jenner was an asshole, why isn't Caitlyn Jenner an asshole? If the personality's still there and this is the right face for the movement, great. But if I don't like Bruce Jenner, why should I be forced to like Caitlyn Jenner just because of a transition? And I think this has been my entire argument throughout this movement in this initiative, because I never was a fan of the Kardashians as a whole, not just Bruce, but the entire family. This is significant, and it's going to be a challenge for building level principles, because if there is a major transgender movement, this is going to look differently, and if this is not the person that should be leading the movement, that's going to be an issue, and that's going to be a problem as well. So, should principals be aware? Yes. You have to prepare for a changing movement with transgender students at the high school level. I don't know what this looks like. You don't know what this looks like either. It's beyond me. Is it something that should be on the radar of everyone in this class? Yes, because in high schools now, this is going to be a consideration. In popular culture, I would strongly encourage you to watch the current season of South Park, because they're presenting it in a very interesting way, and a lot of it relates to schools. I'm impressed with Trey Parker and Matt Stone and how they're presenting this issue and making it controversial without being controversial. So moving on, we're going to talk about women in leadership, which is the premise of this chapter. But whether or not there is a glass ceiling, I think this is important, and I think you need to understand this. So I need you to understand, and this is important, when you say there is a glass ceiling on women getting into administrative positions, you have to be careful on how you word it and how you say it. It's a 50-50 split across the United States between men and women in administrative positions. No matter what you tell me, that's true. But ask yourself why. It's because we have more elementary schools and more women are in leadership positions in elementary schools. There's more of a shortage of women as high school principals and superintendents, but much, much more as high school principals. Women make less money than men do in administrative positions. But I would ask you another question if we're looking at pay differential. Is there a problem with this speculation because there are better paying opportunities at the high school than at the elementary school level? Does that make a difference? Should we take that into account? Should we consider that? I don't know. I'm not giving you an answer one way or the other. I'm just saying, hey, this is what it is. You can determine on your own if you agree or disagree with that. So, ascending the ladder. Easiest way to become a superintendent, if that's what you want out of life, you become a superintendent by becoming a high school principal. Any leadership study, I don't care what it is, they will validate the easiest position to be a central administrator is to become a high school principal, bar none. So is there a barrier now for women to ascend to the superintendency because they're trying to, they have to be high school principals, and being a high school principal as a woman is much more challenging than it is getting in than being an elementary school principal. But then is that an unintended barrier that just exists? So high school principal versus superintendent. Ashland University is a university in Ohio. Judy Alston is a great woman. She's the lead researcher on women in the superintendency. Her work on it has been nationally recognized, but she had a controversial finding that basically said that women were twice as likely to become a superintendent than it was for them to become a high school principal. That is a big, big deal, and I think that's important. I ask, is that fair? Why do you think that is? I relate it to just the notion of supervision, the notion of being a public relations figure, and there is a gender bias and there's gender problems in society. Is it fair? I don't know. I mean, you need to determine that on your own. I don't want to pass judgments. But I worked with gender issues being at Pitt. We had a lot of heavy-duty gender people at the University of Pittsburgh. But it's imperative that you understand the barriers that exist if you want to do this as a research interest. I think that's important. I have no problem with you saying that men make more money than women do in schools, but please back it up with supporting facts. So moving on, selected amount of, we're going to look at some historicals. I'm only going to look at some of the more important studies. If this is an interest of yours, look at it on your own. It's something that you could develop into a thesis or a dissertation topic eventually. 1970s really was when studying women in leadership roles became common. Women were more likely to assume domestic responsibility. Women received less formal training and less formal developmental opportunities than men, and they were less likely to self-promote and negotiate. The unwillingness to negotiate or the uncomfortableness of negotiation really is what causes the salary differential that we've already spoke about. In leadership positions, you need to know that women do outnumber men. That is a true fact, and you might disagree with me, but once again, I'm right on this. I know that I'm right on this, but that includes middle management. The problem is the top level that anybody can attain, the CEO, the high school principal. That's where the glass ceiling is. It is not women have a glass ceiling in leadership roles. When people say that to me, it's not true. There are more women in leadership roles than there are men. But there are 7% more of men in the labor force than women still. Women earn more bachelor's degrees and better degrees than men do, and I relate that to career and technical school. That's my reasoning. Most doctorates are earned by women, but only 3% of women are CEOs in Fortune 500 companies. That's where the barrier is, and that's where the glass ceiling exists. So other information from 2010. 90 of the 535 seats in the U.S. Congress were women. Women of color occupy only 24 seats. The world average of women in legislatures or parliaments is less than 20%, and we don't have much of a high ranking of military officers that are women either. So women are earning more degrees than men, but the differences are in the degrees that women are obtaining. MBAs, and I'm doing MBA courses, and I've done quite a few of them. They're only coming in at 1/3 of the rate in which men are. They're 10% behind men in law degrees. and they're roughly 15% behind men in medical degrees. That balance really shows a difference in human capital in kind of a way to show the differences between the two of them. There's also the mommy path, but I hesitate to say that because I'm sure people could find that discriminatory, but Nordhaus cites the mommy path. States that women self-select out of leadership tracks by saying, I'm doing the mommy track. I give you research that supports it. But in education, we have sabbaticals and maternity leave. So are we supporting this, and are we saying this is acceptable practice, and then allow a woman to enter back into the appropriate leadership trajectory? So women are more likely to quit jobs for family reason and experience more losses after quitting than men do. They still do most of the child care and housework, and those that use flex time and workplace leave are marginalized. That is a true statement. It's difficult to be taken seriously and taken as a leader that's in charge if you've been taking time off, because reentry becomes difficult. Men are more likely than women to ask for what they want. This is a negotiation process. High-level positions, there's more triggers, there's more unstructured nature, which does disadvantage women. So, women are normally in positions that are lower in visibility than men. This is the women in the elementary school bias that exists. Our textbook speaks about the problems that Hillary Clinton might have in running for president because she does not experience traditional gender roles. And I think that was the case when Bill was running in 92. There was this major division of what was expected that Hillary should be acting like, and people had a problem with it. Is it a problem? I don't know. I think it depends on how you interpret it. So, do women assimilate to the stereotype? Have you found women that have assimilated to a stereotype to be part of a team? And, this is another touchy subject, but honestly, I have. I've worked with women that are more brilliant than most of the men that they worked in. I'm very transparent about this. I prefer a woman as a boss. I've had amazing women leaders, but I've also had very bad leaders. I can't think, and I've been in this career for 16 years, I can't think of one good or bad male leader that I've had. They've just kind of been there. I found women to be very dynamic and very empowering with my personality type. I've also found women to be very demeaning with my personality type as well. I think that's been kind of like my finding. But I found women that have assimilated to gender roles that other people think they should have in order to advance, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, who knows. I think composition of the group does make a difference, and I think your environment matters as well. So what can change this? What are the problems that will stop this from occurring? Is it an organizational challenge, or is it something more than that? I think that's an important idea, and I think that's a big takeaway message on it as well. So that's a quick overview. I'm not going into depth on this topic. I've already went probably about 15 minutes. It's more than I wanted to go, but this is something that we've seen a million dissertations on. We've looked at it as leadership traits. If I can do anything to help you with this approach, let me know. This is more, if you're going to do a doc program, this may be something you want to look at. Just make sure you have the correct nomenclature down and you understand when you're talking about a glass ceiling, what a glass ceiling represents and what it looks like. That's all that I ask of you. So thank you very much, and hope you enjoyed the chapter.